The land was still when the sun began to fall, spilling long shadows across the dirt. The rancher had been riding since dawn, dust clinging to his coat, his horse breathing slow and heavy beneath him. The day had been quiet, the kind of quiet only the desert knows, too wide, too empty, too full of memories he didn't want to think about. He was heading home when he saw something that made him pull on the reins. There near the fence line, a shape lay half buried in the dust. It didn't move. For a second he thought it might be an animal, a coyote maybe, but the wind shifted and he heard it. A voice, faint and broken. "Please, I'm begging you." He froze. The words cut through the wind like a whisper meant only for him. He dismounted, boots crunching against the dry earth, his hand resting near the pistol at his side. The shape moved, a small twitch of the hand. He stepped closer, crouched low, and what he saw made his breath catch. It was a young woman. Her skin was pale beneath the dust, her lips cracked, her hair tangled. Her wrists were bound with a strip of rope so tight it had cut into her skin. She looked up at him with eyes that didn't belong to someone free, they belonged to someone hunted. He didn't speak. He'd seen too much trouble come from talking too soon. She tried to sit up, but her strength gave out and she fell back into the dirt. "Don't send me back," she whispered. "Please don't." The rancher glanced around the empty plain. The horizon was clear, nothing but heat, haze, and silence. But the way she said it made him feel watched. He knelt down, untied her wrists. The rope was stiff with dried blood. "You're safe now," he said quietly, though he didn't quite believe it himself. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time he saw what hid behind her fear. Not just pain, something darker. When he tried to lift her to her feet, her voice trembled again, softer this time. "If they find me," she said, "you'll wish you never did." The wind picked up, brushing the dust against his boots. He didn't answer. He just pulled her up. She could barely stand, her knees trembling as he steadied her. Her skin felt cold, even in the fading heat of the sun. He didn't ask questions yet. He just guided her toward his horse, keeping his eyes on the horizon. Something about the way she looked over her shoulder, like she expected to see someone there, made his stomach twist. He lifted her up gently onto the saddle. She winced when his hands brushed her back, and he saw a dark stain beneath the cloth on her shoulder. Blood. Not fresh, but not old enough to forget. He mounted behind her, wrapping the reins around his hand. "Hold on," he said, but she didn't move. Her arms just hung there limp like she'd already given up. He took a breath and clicked the reins. The horse started toward the ranch, slow at first, then steady. The ride back was silent. The only sounds were the hooves thudding against the dry ground and the wind whistling through the open plains. The sky above was streaked with orange and violet, the sun melting behind the hills. She swayed in front of him, half conscious, her head tilting forward with every step. He tightened his grip to keep her steady. He didn't know who she was or what she'd done, but she was in no shape to talk about it now. By the time they reached the ranch, night had already started to fall. The lantern by the barn door glowed faintly, throwing a soft light over the dirt. He dismounted and helped her down. Her legs gave out as soon as her boots hit the ground. He caught her before she fell, feeling her heartbeat against his arm, fast, panicked, fragile. "Easy," he murmured, guiding her inside the barn. He laid her on a haystack near the stove and grabbed an old blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. The fire inside the stove had nearly died out, so he threw in a few logs. Soon the flames came alive again, flickering orange across the wooden walls. She shivered and pulled the blanket tighter. He filled a tin cup with water and brought it to her. She stared at it for a long moment before taking a slow sip. Her lips trembled. "Why'd you help me?" she whispered, voice raw. He shrugged. "Didn't feel right leaving you out there." Her eyes lifted to his face. "You shouldn't have," he frowned. "You think I should have left you for dead?" Her answer came quiet but steady. "Yes." He leaned back, studying her. The light from the fire caught her face, young, worn, the kind of beauty that didn't belong out here. He could tell she'd seen too much, maybe done too much. Her hands shook as she held the cup, and he noticed the rope burns again. They weren't from a single night. Those marks were old, layered, healed over and broken open again. Whoever she'd run from had kept her tied for a long time. "What happened to you?" he asked finally. She stared into the fire. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." She hesitated like she was deciding whether to tell him or not. The flames crackled and the sound filled the space between them. "They said I took something," she began softly. "Something worth killing over. I didn't, but that doesn't matter. Once they say it, it's true." He didn't interrupt. She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They came at night. Said I'd stolen from the mine. I didn't even work there. They dragged me out, beat me, branded me like one of their cattle." Her voice caught in her throat. "I got away when one of them fell asleep. I've been running ever since." He let her words sink in. The fire popped, sending a spark into the air. "You said they branded you." She nodded slowly and moved the blanket from her shoulder. Beneath the torn fabric was a faint mark, an emblem burned deep into her skin. It was shaped like a circle with a symbol inside. He'd seen it before. Everyone around these parts had. It belonged to the Hastings Mining Company, the biggest operation for miles and the meanest. He exhaled slowly. "You crossed the wrong men." Her eyes flashed with fear. "No one crosses them. They just pick who they want and call it justice." He stood up, walked to the window and looked out into the darkness. He'd worked for Hastings once. Not for long, but long enough to know the kind of things they did when no one was watching. Long enough to know she wasn't lying. "How far behind you are they?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Close enough," she finally said. "I can feel it. They don't stop." He looked out over the open land, the faint moonlight washing the fields silver. The wind carried a sound he couldn't place, maybe a coyote, maybe something else. He rested his hand on the window frame and thought about what to do next. "You can stay here tonight," he said, "but come morning you'll need to move on." Her face fell. "You think I want to stay? You think I want to bring this here?" He turned toward her, his expression firm. "You already did." Her eyes dropped and for a moment neither spoke. The firelight danced across the floor, the shadows long and unsteady. Then she whispered something that made his blood run cold. "They don't come for gold," she said. "They come for silence." He frowned. "What do you mean?" Her hands tightened around the blanket. "They don't just kill, they erase. Like you were never here." He studied her face, trying to see if she was telling the truth, but her eyes weren't the kind that lied. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the window panes. Somewhere in the distance, a horse neighed, sharp and sudden. He looked up, every muscle in his body tensing. She looked at him too, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. "They found me," she said. He grabbed his shotgun from the wall and walked to the door. He opened it slowly, the hinges creaking. The night was too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels alive. He could smell dust and smoke on the breeze. And then he saw it, faint lights moving along the ridge, too even to be fireflies, too slow to be stars. Lanterns. He looked back at her. "You weren't wrong." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, her voice barely a breath. "I never am." He stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand, his jaw tight. The lanterns kept moving, closer now, 5 of them, maybe 6, their glow bobbing in rhythm. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of hooves. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched the lights and waited. The lights on the ridge moved closer, slow and steady, like predators that didn't need to rush. The rancher stood on the porch, the shotgun resting across his arm, eyes fixed on the faint glow weaving through the dark. Each flicker of those lanterns seemed to pull the night tighter around him. Inside, the woman was silent, though he could feel her fear pressing against the air between them. He'd been in plenty of fights before, but this felt different. It wasn't anger or pride burning in his chest. It was instinct. The kind that came when you realized someone else's life now depended on what you did next. The hoofbeats grew clearer. He counted 4 horses, maybe 5. No talking, no laughter, just the rhythm of pursuit. Men used to catching their prey. He cocked the shotgun once, loud enough for the sound to travel across the yard. It didn't scare them off. When the riders came into view, they stopped a few yards from the gate. Their leader, a tall man wearing a brown coat and a wide-brimmed hat, dismounted. Even from a distance, the rancher could see the shine of a pistol hanging low on his hip. "Even in," the man called out, his voice calm, smooth. "We're looking for a woman came this way. You seen her?" The rancher didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch long enough to make them shift in their saddles. Finally he said, "Ain't seen anyone worth looking for." The man smiled faintly. "Funny thing, we tracked her footprints straight to your fence." The rancher shrugged. "Tracks don't mean much out here. Wind can trick you." The leader took a few steps closer, boots crunching in the dirt. "Mind if we take a look around?" "I do," the rancher said flatly. The man studied him, eyes narrow. "You always this hospitable?" "Only to folks who knock first." The riders shifted again, the horses restless. The rancher could feel the tension snapping tight, the air crackling like a storm about to break. Inside the barn he heard a faint creak. She was still there, hiding in the dark, probably praying he wouldn't give her away. The leader's tone changed, less polite now. "She's nothing but trouble, friend. Stole from men who don't forgive easy. Helping her will only make you part of the debt." The rancher kept his gaze steady. "Ain't in the habit of turning folks over to anyone, especially men who talk like bankers." The man smiled again, but this time there was no charm in it. "Then I reckon we'll help ourselves." He signaled to the others. Two of them started toward the barn. The rancher moved fast, stepping off the porch and pumping the shotgun once, the sound echoing through the still night. "Next man crosses that line gets a hole big enough to fit regret through." They froze. The leader tilted his head, assessing him like a man measuring a wall before deciding how to climb it. "You'd die for a stranger," the rancher's voice dropped low. "Ain't about dying, it's about sleeping at night." The man chuckled under his breath. "Fair enough." He turned to his riders. "Let's ask her ourselves then." Before the rancher could react, one of the men by the horses called out, "Boss!" He pointed toward the field. The leader turned, squinting. A second later something flickered in the dark. Another light, not theirs. The woman stepped out of the barn doorway, her face half hidden in the glow of the lantern she held. Her hands shook, but her eyes didn't. "You want me," she said, voice trembling but loud enough to carry. "Then take me." The rancher's stomach sank. "Don't," he hissed under his breath, but she didn't stop. The leader smiled wide. "There she is." He started forward, but the rancher moved faster, stepping between them. The barrel of the shotgun came up again. "She ain't going anywhere," he said. The man stopped a few feet away, close enough for the rancher to see the scars under his stubble. "You sure you want to die on this hill, old man?" The rancher's eyes didn't blink. "I've died on worse." The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of metal. The leader's hand twitched toward his gun, but before he could draw, the woman's lantern slipped from her hand and crashed to the ground. Fire bloomed fast, feeding on the dry grass. The men cursed, backing away from the sudden blaze. The rancher took the chance, grabbed her by the arm and pulled her behind the porch. Smoke filled the air, thick and sharp. The horses panicked, kicking and snorting. Through the flames the leader shouted something, but the words were lost in the wind. The rancher fired once, not to hit but to warn. The blast echoed like thunder. When the smoke began to thin, the riders were gone. Only the smell of burned grass and the crackle of dying fire remained. The woman coughed, her face streaked with soot. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. He looked out into the darkness where the men had vanished. "You're right," he said quietly, "but I couldn't just watch." She stared at him for a moment, then whispered, "They'll come back." He nodded. "Then we'll be ready." She hesitated, clutching the blanket tighter around her. "You don't understand," she said. "They don't stop until it's done." He turned to her, eyes hard, voice calm. "Neither do I." For a moment neither spoke. The fire flickered low, the last light of it painting their faces in shades of gold and shadow. Somewhere out in the distance, a lone horse cried out, its sound fading into the night. He walked back into the barn and began checking his rifle, each click and motion deliberate. She watched him silently, her fear mixed now with something else, trust maybe. He didn't ask her name and she didn't offer it. All he knew was this. Whatever storm she'd brought to his doorstep, it had his name on it now. The smoke from the burned grass still lingered in the air by morning. It clung to his clothes, to his hair, to every breath he took. The rancher didn't sleep that night, neither did she. Every sound outside, the creak of wood, the rustle of wind, made her flinch. He didn't blame her. He'd seen fear before, but this was different. Hers wasn't the kind that passes when the danger's gone. It was the kind that stays, even when you want to forget it. He stood by the porch, a cup of cold coffee in his hand, eyes fixed on the horizon. The plains were quiet again, but quiet never meant safe. The riders had vanished into the dark, yet something in his gut told him they hadn't gone far. Men like that didn't just give up, they circled back when you stopped looking. Behind him, he heard the door open. The woman stepped outside, wrapped in one of his old coats. It hung loose on her, the sleeves rolled up past her elbows. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "Didn't need to," he replied. She looked out toward the open land. "They'll come before noon, they always move with the light." He turned his head slightly. "You sure of that?" she nodded. "They're not afraid of being seen. They own the sheriff, the riders, the law. If they want someone gone, no one stops them." He studied her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands still trembled when she talked about them. "Why'd they want you?" he asked. She hesitated. Her gaze dropped to the ground. "Because I found something I wasn't supposed to." He waited, but she didn't continue, so he asked, "What you find?" Her voice cracked. "Names, ledger books, proof of what they did to the miners. The ones who never came home." He frowned. "Hastings," she nodded once. "They buried those men in the tunnels, called it an accident, but I found the records that said otherwise." The rancher let out a slow breath. He'd heard stories, rumors passed between towns, but nothing solid enough to confront a man like Hastings with. Now it made sense. She hadn't just run from a lie, she'd run from the truth. "You still have it?" he asked quietly. She nodded toward the barn. "It's in my satchel, that's why they can't let me live." He thought for a moment. "You could ride east, cross the river, maybe reach the fort. If you get there, you can hand it to someone who ain't in their pocket." She gave a bitter laugh. "You think anyone out there cares? They'll take it, burn it, and send me back in a box." He looked down at his boots, silent. He couldn't argue with that. She was right. Out here, truth didn't stand a chance against power. A breeze swept across the plains, carrying dust and the faint smell of rain. He could feel the storm building somewhere beyond the hills. He went inside, loaded a fresh round into his rifle, and laid it on the table. When he turned back, she was standing in the doorway, her eyes fixed on the weapon. "You can still walk away," she said. "They don't know your name." He gave her a half-smile. "Out here, everyone knows everyone's name." "Won't matter." She looked down. "Then you'll die for nothing." He picked up the rifle and slung it over his shoulder. "Maybe, but I'll make sure they remember why." The air shifted then, heavy and low. The kind of stillness that only comes right before something breaks. He stepped outside again, scanning the horizon. That's when he saw it dust. A small cloud rising in the distance, just where the trail cut through the dry creek bed. "They're here," he said. She came beside him, her breath catching. "There's more of them this time." He nodded. "Figured there would be." He led her back into the barn and handed her his old revolver. "You know how to use one of these." She looked at it for a second, then gripped it with both hands. "Enough. Good. Stay low, keep quiet, don't shoot unless you have to. What about you?" "I'll be the one they see first." He moved back to the porch, the wind starting to pick up again. The dust cloud grew larger, the riders clearer now, 7, maybe 8. They rode in a line, steady and slow, like men who knew no one could stop them. He stood tall, waiting as they came closer. When they reached the gate, they didn't bother to dismount. The same leader from the night before sat at the front, his hat pulled low. "You made a mistake, friend," he called out. The rancher didn't move. "I've made plenty. You'll have to be more specific." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You got something that belongs to us." "I don't own much," the rancher said, "and what I do own I keep." The man chuckled. "You think you can stand between me and Hastings?" "I don't stand for him, or you." The leader's smile faded. He lifted his hand. "Then you fall with her." The first shot cracked through the air, echoing across the plains. The rancher dove behind the porch railing, wood splintering around him. He returned fire, hitting one of the riders square in the shoulder. The others scattered, taking cover behind rocks and fence posts. The horses screamed, kicking at the dirt. Inside the barn, the woman crouched low, clutching the revolver. Every sound, the gunfire, the shouting, sent her heart racing faster. She peeked through a gap in the boards and saw one of the riders creeping toward the back. She aimed, her hands trembling, and fired. The shot went wide but close enough to send him running. Her breathing came fast, uneven. She fired again, this time hitting his leg. He fell hard, screaming. Outside, the rancher reloaded, sweat stinging his eyes. Another bullet tore through the porch post, grazing his arm. He grunted, pressing a hand to the wound. He could hear them shouting, circling around. He leaned out, fired again, and dropped another man from his horse. The leader cursed, ordering the rest forward. The rancher ducked back inside the doorway just as two more bullets tore through the wall. The woman crawled toward him, her face pale. "There's too many," she said. He handed her another shell. "Doesn't matter. They'll kill you." He looked at her and managed a faint smile. "Not before they remember me." Another gunshot rang out, closer this time. The sound of boots hit the porch steps. The rancher swung the rifle up, ready. The door burst open and the leader stepped inside. "End of the line," he said. The rancher didn't blink. "You first." The leader's grin turned cruel as he leveled his pistol at the rancher's chest. "You've got one chance, old man. Step aside." The rancher didn't move. His finger rested lightly on the trigger, his body still as stone. The two men stared at each other, the silence thick enough to hear the creak of the old boards beneath their boots. Then the world exploded in motion. The leader fired first, but the rancher dropped low and fired back in the same breath. The blast from the shotgun roared through the small cabin, shattering a window and filling the air with smoke. The man staggered backward, clutching his side, his pistol falling from his hand. Outside, more gunfire erupted. Bullets ripped through the porch posts, splinters flying like sparks. The woman ducked behind a barrel, her hands shaking around the revolver. The sound was deafening, horses screaming, men shouting, wood breaking under the force of lead. The rancher moved fast, reloading by touch. He fired again, hitting one of the riders as he tried to flank the barn. The man fell hard, his lantern tumbling into the dirt, flames licking at the dry grass. Smoke began to rise again, curling into the low gray sky. "Back inside," he shouted to her. She hesitated for a second before running, her bare feet pounding against the wooden floor. He followed, slamming the door shut just as another bullet splintered it. She pressed her back against the wall, her breathing ragged. "They won't stop," she gasped. "Not until—" "Then we make 'em," he cut in, his voice calm but cold. He handed her a spare shell. "You load for me." "Keep low." She nodded, her trembling hand steadying as she slid the shells into place. He could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else, resolve. Whatever she'd been before, she wasn't helpless now. The leader outside was shouting orders again. "Burn it down," he roared. "Flush them out." The rancher's jaw tightened. "They're gonna set the barn," he muttered. "Get to the back. We'll use the trough as cover." Together they slipped out through the rear door, crouching low behind the horses' stalls. Smoke drifted through the gaps in the boards, and the smell of burning hay filled the air. The woman coughed, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "They'll burn with us if they try," he said quietly. She looked at him, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "You don't even know my name." "Don't need to," he replied. "You're here, that's enough." A shout came from outside, followed by another shot. The rancher peered through a crack and saw one of the men carrying a torch. The fire caught quickly, spreading along the fence line. The orange glow reflected in his eyes. He had to move fast. He kicked the back door open and fired. The man with the torch went down, the flame rolling from his hand into the dirt. Another rider charged forward, but the rancher swung the shotgun like a club, catching him across the jaw. The horse reared, throwing the rider off into the dust. "Get to the horses," he yelled. She didn't hesitate. She ran to the corral, untied the nearest mare, and climbed on bareback. He followed, grabbing the reins of his own. The gunfire chased them as they galloped away from the burning barn, the light of the flames stretching across the fields. They rode hard, the wind whipping against their faces, the smell of smoke thick behind them. The woman clung to the saddle, her body swaying with every stride. The rancher glanced over his shoulder. 3 riders were following, their lanterns bobbing like ghosts in the dark. "They're gaining," she cried. He didn't answer. He pulled his rifle from its holster and turned halfway in the saddle, firing a quick shot. One of the lanterns went out. He fired again, hitting another. The last man kept coming, pushing his horse harder. "Hold on," he shouted. They reached the dry riverbed, the ground dipping sharply. The horses stumbled but kept running. Dust filled the air, blinding them for a moment. The sound of hooves behind them grew louder, too close. The rancher pulled his horse to a stop, swung the rifle up, and waited. The rider burst through the dust, his gun raised. The rancher fired once. The man toppled from his saddle, hitting the ground with a dull thud. His horse bolted into the distance. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the horse's breathing. The woman looked back, her face pale in the moonlight. "You killed them," she whispered. He wiped the sweat from his brow. "No," he said quietly, "just the ones who wouldn't stop." She looked at him differently then, not just as the man who saved her, but as someone carrying his own ghosts. The faint light of dawn was beginning to rise, soft and gray, washing over the empty land. He dismounted and helped her down. She was shaking, not from fear but exhaustion. "We can't go back," she said. "Wasn't planning to," she hesitated. "There's a town east of here, small one. They won't expect me to head that way." He nodded. "Then that's where we'll go." She looked at him, eyes wide. "You'd come with me." He adjusted the strap of his rifle. "You think I'm letting you walk into that alone after all this?" She didn't answer, just watched him for a long moment. Then she said softly, "You don't even know what you're risking." He looked out toward the horizon. "Don't need to." The sun broke over the hills, painting the world in gold. The smoke from the fire still rose behind them, a dark pillar against the new light. The rancher climbed back onto his horse, glancing once more toward the west. He could still see the faint glow of the burning barn. "Let's move," he said. They rode side by side into the early morning, the sound of hooves echoing through the quiet land. Neither spoke again for a long time. The air smelled of ash and sagebrush. Every mile between them and the fire felt like borrowed time, but for now, they were alive. And out here, that was enough. The first light of dawn spread across the open plains, washing the hills in shades of gold and pale blue. The air was cold, still holding the chill of the night before. They had ridden until their horses were nearly spent, the smell of smoke fading behind them, but the memory of it still sharp. The rancher slowed his horse near a rocky outcrop and nodded for her to stop. The land here was quiet, hidden from the road. "We'll rest here," he said. She dismounted, her legs weak and trembling. Dust clung to her face and hair, her eyes red from exhaustion. She dropped to the ground, sitting against a boulder, hugging her knees beneath his old coat. He tied the horses and took a slow breath, scanning the horizon. No sign of riders, no glint of lanterns, just open sky and silence. "Think they'll follow?" she asked. He squatted beside the fire pit and began to gather dry brush. "They'll try," he said. "Men like that don't like to lose, but the storm'll slow 'em." She looked up. Clouds were starting to build in the distance, dark, heavy, crawling slow across the horizon. "You really think we'll outrun them?" He struck a match and lit the brush. "Ain't about outrunning. It's about making them think twice." The fire caught, small and steady. He poured a bit of water from his canteen into a tin pot and set it over the flames. For a long moment they said nothing. The only sound was the crackle of fire and the soft whine of the wind curling through the rocks. She broke the silence first. "You shouldn't have come with me." He didn't look at her. "You'd be dead by now if I hadn't." "Then I'd have died quick," she muttered. You don't understand what they are." He glanced up at her, his eyes calm but unreadable. "I've seen worse." She shook her head. "No, you haven't." The wind shifted, blowing a strand of hair across her face. She didn't move to brush it away. Her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. They don't just kill, she said quietly. They erase every record, every name, everyone who's ever helped me gone. The sheriff who gave me shelter found with a bullet in his head. The woman who fed me on the road burned in her house. They leave nothing behind. He stirred the fire with a stick, the sparks floating up into the dim light. Then maybe it's time someone stopped them. She looked at him sharply. And what happens when they stop you? He gave a small, humorless smile. Then maybe someone else takes a turn. The pot began to steam. He poured her a cup and handed it over. Her hands shook as she took it, and he realized she was shivering, not from cold but from everything that had come before. She looked down into the cup like she could see her future in it. You could leave, she said. Ride the other way, pretend you never met me. He took a slow sip from his own cup. Could, he said. But I won't. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You're a fool, he smiled faintly. I've been called worse. The storm moved closer, the wind picking up dust from the valley below. He stood, scanning the distance again. The light was different now, flat and cold. We move when the rain starts, he said. They'll lose our trail. She didn't answer. She just stared at him like she was trying to memorize his face. The firelight flickered across his features, catching the lines carved deep by years of sun and loss. After a moment she asked, Why are you doing this? He looked out at the horizon. Because I once watched someone beg for help and I didn't listen. Spent every day since trying to make up for that. Her breath caught. Did you lose her? He nodded slowly. My wife. Fever took her while I was working the range. By the time I got back, she was gone, didn't even get to say goodbye. The woman lowered her gaze, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry, he shrugged. Ain't your fault, but maybe helping you, maybe that's how I pay it back. They sat in silence again, the fire crackling low. When the first drops of rain hit the ground, they packed what little they had. The storm rolled in fast, sheets of rain sweeping across the plains. The sound of thunder echoed like distant cannon fire. They rode side by side through the downpour, the cold water running down their faces. By midday, the rain had washed away every trace of their path. The wind had turned, carrying the scent of wet earth and smoke. The woman looked back once but saw nothing behind them. No riders, no flames, just endless gray sky and open land. When they reached a small ridge overlooking the valley, the rancher stopped. The world below was drenched and silent, the kind of silence that felt earned. He could see the faint outline of a town far in the distance, small, hidden behind the hills. That where you're heading? He asked. She nodded. There's someone there who can take the ledger. Someone who still believes in the law. He watched her for a long moment, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. You really think one book's gonna change what they do? She looked down, her expression unreadable. Maybe not, but it's proof. And proof don't burn easy. He grunted softly, half in doubt, half in respect. You'll need a fresh horse before you get there. She looked up at him. You're not coming, he shook his head. Not my fight to finish. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped when she saw his eyes. There was a weight in them, the kind that came from a man who'd carried too many ghosts already. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded once. Keep riding, don't look back. The wind howled across the ridge, carrying the smell of rain and dust. She mounted her horse, pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders and gave him one last look. He stood there, a dark silhouette against the pale sky, rifle slung across his shoulder, his hat low over his eyes. She turned the horse east and rode away, her figure shrinking with each stride until the mist swallowed her. The rancher watched until she disappeared completely, the rain washing away her tracks almost as fast as they formed. He stood alone on the ridge, the storm passing overhead, the plains stretching endless in every direction. The wind picked up again, cold and sharp, but he didn't move. His hand rested on the rifle, his gaze fixed on the empty trail ahead as if waiting for something or someone to return.